Hello everybody, and welcome to the next installment of Anne's portrait. This is a continuation right off from the last one, and now I'm starting to put values down to preserve where the line art is, and to make sure that I know where all the shadows are. I'm using a green gray, which is reminiscent of a lot of portrait painters. Some people use a very bright green as well. But this is my way of kind of dipping my toe into the green. So it's like a green gray value study. Almost like a black and white, just tonal value study. And this way I kind of get an idea of where everything goes without having to worry about the color of anything yet. Green is actually the complement of red on the color wheel, and so some of the green, when it comes through in the painting, has a bit of a vibration. It lends a nice vibration to, or harmony to, the pinks and reds of skin tone. Personally, the way I paint, I layer so many times. I don't know that this is actually going to show through or benefit it in any way. I just like the way it actually just allows me to kind of sketch all the shadows and such. So I'm not really sure that it lends its way to the finished product as much as it would, say, with oil paints. Oil paints allow things to kind of like shine through. I guess in acrylics they could too, but like I said, my style is kind of, I don't want to say it's my own. I know that other people do it as well, but the way that I paint, I just layer and layer and layer and blend and blend and blend until it looks right to me. So eventually all this color kind of goes away, but who knows, maybe it does do something underneath all the pinks and browns and such. So anyway, this painting a portrait like this is just, it's like an act of faith. It really is. Every time, even though I have been an artist for a while now, I've painted a couple portraits by this time, but I wouldn't say that I'm like a very well-versed portrait painter. The most realistic things that I've done have been a couple portraits, but they've also been pet portraits, dogs, cats, animals. So humans, of course, are another animal, but they don't have that luxury of fur. Just lots of pink skin or brown skin. But anyway, I feel like I'm still learning portraiture. I probably will never feel like I've mastered it, because it goes through so many stages, hence the title of this, the ugly stages. It has to go through these stages for me as well. I'm sure that there are some painters that can just slap some paint on and they put it in all the right places and they only have to do maybe 1 or 2 layers and then they're done. I'm sure that they exist. I'm sure that happens with some people. For some reason, this is just the way that I landed on it. The layering and going over things until the blending and the color blends were just right for me. It just takes time and it takes a lot of, layers. So there is no right or wrong way to get to a finished portrait in my eyes. However you get there is how you get there. I'm labeling this as a tutorial video, but by all means, it's just a way of showing, hey, this is how I do it. And I like watching other artists and I go, oh, that's how they do it. That's different. Maybe I should try that. Hence the green tone. And actually I might try a portrait of myself with lots of green underneath it. Just to try that green, because it's just amazing to me how vibrant it ends up looking when the pale tones start to, go over them on top. It's just pretty cool. So that's something to do in the future. And I don't want to do that much experimenting with Anne's portrait, just because it's going to be going to lots of family members, copies of it. So kind of want to stick to where I what I know best right now. That being said, I don't do a lot of portraits, so it is very unnerving and exciting and fearful to do a portrait, especially to film it. Yeah, it's really an act of faith. I sometimes don't know, and I'm just, I'm all about honesty. Why not, right? Sometimes I don't know that I'm going to be getting the result that I want still after all these years. I really can't say for 100%. I feel like I will, I really have a lot of faith that I will, but I can't say 100% that it will look great or exactly the way I wanted it to when I'm finished with it. That's just the nature of my paintings. I feel like there's just so much organic, so many things could happen. I don't know. It's kind of up in the air. So I use the term tutorial very loosely. So here I'm laying in, of course, the values in the hair. I really try to get the values pretty much of everything down first before I go in and start detailing. I've also put some of the green reflection also in her hair. And at this point I had planned on making sure that I had green reflection on certain parts of her face and also blue. Green is a bit of a warm color because it does have a lot of yellow in it. And then she's got her blue dress, so I'm definitely going to be putting some blue cooler tones to reflect the sky bouncing off of her highlights. Here I'm adjusting her shoulders. I just kind of looked at them again and felt they were a little too bowed, too rounded. And here I'm missing footage. So yeah, so there's a big jump. There was dry time, and then there was a big jump to this point. I had technical difficulties, and then I did not check. I put my earbuds in and did not check to see that when I hit record, it was genuinely recording, and it wasn't. I can hear a beep beep when I hit record, but again, I had earbuds in. So anyway, you can see that there was a lot of modeling that happened in the face at this point. With skin tones over it, I have some pale purples and some yellows, a little bit of greens, very little, but mostly it's peaches. And I am just trying to hold on to the values and kind of blocking in shadows and highlights at that point. And I'm just continuing the same thing down onto the chin. I didn't have as good a flow because mentally all I could think of was I couldn't believe I wasn't recording that whole time. It was probably about an hour of footage. So that gives you an idea of how long these portraits do take, especially it being the face. So I did miss some stuff there. But don't worry, I do go back over it quite a few times. So you'll definitely get to see those transitions. But for now, enjoy the blocking in. So as you can see here, I am working back over an area that looked like a hot mess a minute ago. That happens a lot in the quote-unquote ugly stages of a painting. We call them that in my art community. It's kind of a term of endearment, just because you have to get past the points and build up the layers past those points. So there's a lot of push and pull back and forth in the shadows and the highlights. When I am in the middle of painting, like you can see that highlight to the right of her mouth, it's way too far down, and I just highlight it again. It's way too far down, it's way too sharp. I'm not worried about it while I'm painting, because I know that I'm going to be pushing and pulling the contours of these shadows. You can see I've already gone over it once, and it has a little bit of a shadow there. And so what's going to happen is eventually that's just going to be a smooth transition from that highlight area into the shadow area. At this point, I was still using a lot of raw umber for my shadowing. I made the mistake of starting this painting without having an ultramarine blue. I use phthalo blue instead, and phthalo blue for me is very, very strong, and it goes teal really quickly with any addition of yellow or orange at all. It'll just jump into the greens. So I was trying to make it work because I've never really painted with phthalo blue like that before, and I did enjoy it. It was fine, but I was used to a cooler blue. I've almost always used ultramarine. I was just out of it. And I work a full-time job, so just between painting and video editing, general housework, and working, I don't always have time to just, run to the store. It's not that it's a very far. I do have a local store I can go to get paint, and I have it now, actually. I did go and get it at this point. But I was just anxious to throw paint down, and I'm like, hey, it's a blue, let's try it out. So phthalo blue, I can see where you can see I just put detail in the eyes. The only reason I did that was because I was my feelings were very anxious at this time. This is an early stage to be even considering bright highlights, but I wanted to see if the light in her eyes told me that her eyes were good. And the shape and the position. To me, this stage of the portrait and the structure of her face, look at how dark that shadow is. It is a lot of push and pull, and anyway, she looks a lot like her daughter in this, more so than herself at this point. But that shadow is way too dark. It ended up looking a little bit like a bruise. But I don't lose faith. I know that that's just, you see, I've already covered it up. Now it just genuinely looks like a shadow. I never lose faith anymore. I used to when I was still a beginner, when I was still struggling with painting. I used to lose faith all the time. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. Look at how terrible this looks at this point. Look at what I just did. I messed it up. There is no mess it up. You just keep going. You just keep layering it. There's some school of thoughts, and I'm still kind of entertaining the thought of overworking a painting. I don't really understand it. A lot of artists use that term, overworking, and I'm looking at the work that they're saying they overworked something, and I understand if you're going for a more like brush strokes or more painterly, quote unquote painterly, where you can see the division of color of brush strokes when you get closer to a painting, but then when you back away they kind of go together better. I get that technique, like I understand it, and I guess that's where they're coming from when they say overworking a painting. I'm looking for smooth transitions in this portrait, and in the portraits that I've done in the past, I don't look for a very choppy look. I want the smoother transitions. It's just what I'm going for. It's just a different art style. So one's not better than the other. It's just, I don't know if anyone would consider me overworking my paintings. I don't think that they would. But, you know, if you have an opinion on it, leave it in the comments. I'd like to see what you guys think about it. But anyway, of course, at this stage, there is absolutely no danger of overworking anything because I'm still trying to get those transitions smooth. Also, another point to bring up, acrylics have this funny little tendency, of when you put them down, they are usually lighter. If they are a lighter color, they look lighter when they're wet, then they dry a little darker. And contrary to that, when you have a darker color, like the one I just put down, when it dries, it might be even darker. So the pigment does shift when it dries. And you have to kind of learn that. And it's not something that you can memorize. I guess eventually you could. If I was doing portraiture all the time, every day, I would have which colors do that, which paint colors in the pigments, which ones, you know, shift down, shift up, whatever in the value. But I don't do it enough, so it's always a little bit of an experiment every time I paint with these skin tones. So oftentimes I'll lay in a shadow and I'll leave it alone, and I'll see, like, how dark was that shadow? How much you can see, you come back to that cheek. That cheek looked a lot brighter when I first put it down, and now it's dark again. So the glaze that I put down was a lot of water and a little bit of pigment. I glazed it over the area, and it did not, when it dried, the pigment that was left was not a lot. So it's not a fault. It's just something that you kind of have to get used to with the paints and learn to be patient with them and then go back and fix them. Here I'm putting in that cooler tone. I want some cooler notes in the shadow areas to reflect the environment a little bit better. I think I had watched a couple of portrait artists and remembered that other colors help the skin tones a lot. I was feeling that my skin tones were a little flat in color, so I wanted to just bring the vibrancy up and the marriage of the colors around her into her skin tone as well. Our skin is very, very reflective, and it actually doesn't have a lot of color on its own. It's slightly translucent when you're talking about Caucasians or any light-skinned race. The skin is actually very translucent, which is why when you look down, you can see the blue of the veins in your skin. That blue and green is your blood, under your skin. So skin is actually quite translucent. So it's red and pink when there's a lot of red blood traveling. I know it's oxygenated blood when it's traveling like in your cheeks, in your nose, sometimes in your forehead or your chest, especially if you're blushing. You can see the red. That's the blood that you can see through your skin. So when you think about, look at this chin. I struggle so much with the chin. When you think about the translucency of skin, you understand why there's so many other colors involved in it. It's reflective and translucent. And I think that's why I've often struggled and why a lot of people struggle with quote-unquote skin tones. It just depends on what you're painting, where they are, and how you interpret it and how the paint interprets it. I'm adding some more green. It's so weird to put green on a face. It's like, gosh, I hope this doesn't look like moss. But it doesn't. It'll end up looking fine. The things that go through your head. Once I get some of the deeper shadows in, I know that when I come in through my highlights, that's when the magic is going to start happening, and the ugly, quote unquote ugly, is going to start to dissipate a little bit better. I did struggle with her mouth shape and still think I might have to refine it a bit. I'm not done by any means. Where I end in this video is genuinely where I've ended painting on it for now. I got a couple days off coming up, so I'll be able to work on it. But you don't want very sharp lines in all the places. Some sharpness is needed. But you can see I'm still working the shape of this mouth because she was speaking in the photograph. And in the photo, her mouth is a little bit softer, so I thought I could get away with her just looking like she's looking around with her mouth slightly open. But the muscles, it's kind of tricky with the muscles, so I'll probably keep working on that. Again, I'm not a seasoned portrait artist by any means, so. This is a little bit slowed down. And I think I slowed this part down because everything else up to this point has been 8 times the normal speed. So this video, even though it's 26 minutes long, is only approximately a half an hour. This is hours of work. So you can see here how I scumble the edges. I lay in the color, and then I often will, depending on how much paint is on my brush, if it's not a lot, I'll just keep using the brush. Sometimes I rinse it off and then use it a little more dry, and I come around those wet edges and I just basically do little circles to what I call scumble it. It's not a dry brush technique though. It's definitely working into the wet edge. And I'm just trying to spread that tone around. And of course, as I'm lightening that section of her face, that shadow above it makes more sense. So I just wanted to slow it down so you could actually see that technique. And here I speed it up again. And that's basically what I do with all of it. It's a glazing, constantly glazing more and more colors over until I reach the tones that I need. And I did lay in some brighter highlights. Some of these highlights will be brought up further when I get closer to the finish. But it's a push and pull with the shadows and the highlights. Especially that darn chin. Boy, that chin really gave me a hard time. I'll probably still mess with it a little bit. But yeah, this is the process, and this is the work. This is the work of it. And it's a lot of work, and I very much enjoy it. If you are passionate about art, this will not bother you. This length of time, this back and forth. It can be very difficult being unnerving as it is to a certain extent. That can be the hardest part, where you're like, I'm spending a lot of time on this and I don't know if this is going anywhere good. But I have learned to just keep going. Just keep it up. And a lot of my favorite artists say the same thing. If it doesn't look right yet, you're not done. That's a quote from Lisa Clow, actually, from Liquitex Fine Art. If it's not there yet, then you're just not finished, and keep going. A lot of beginners quit at earlier stages because they lack the experience to know that if you just keep going forward and keep layering and glazing, they have no idea that eventually you'll start to figure out, oh, this is to this or this is to that, and I need to back this off and I need to go here. And sometimes you have to finish a painting and come back to it months later and look at it and go, oh, that's why I was having a difficult time. I needed to do this, this, and this. It's great to come back and self-criticize and figure out what you love about what you did and what you didn't love so much. And if you can't point out too much that you didn't like, that's successful. Especially if you have a lot of points where you really like it. So hopefully I'll be getting to those points with this portrait. I have faith that I will. And because of all of these quote unquote ugly stages, that's all it is faith. And you should do it anyway, even if you're scared, even if it's unnerving, disappointing. You're like, oh, I'm spending so much time and look at this chin, it still doesn't look right. I don't think that anymore, but I know that a lot of people who are intermediate or beginners think that. And I'm just here to tell you, keep going. At some point, if you're really like, okay, this painting's just going to be a learning experience, then that's okay. But don't give up too soon. And, overwork those paintings if that's what it takes. It's teaching you all kinds of stuff about where you're going, where you need to be. Thank you as always for checking in with me and playing along. Especially if you made it to the end of this video. It's very difficult to watch, I know, because it's not really an end result yet. But as you can see, it's looking a lot better. As always, peace, love, and light to everyone. Thank you for your continued support, and I will see you the next time. Bye.